Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Just imagine 112 degrees and no air conditioning. That's what residents in Portland, Oregon suffered yesterday. Today could even be worse. The entire northwestern United States is sweltering under scalding temperatures that are unprecedented. And you ask yourself, why is it so hot? Because this region is under a once-in-a-millennium heat dome. So could blistering heat be headed your way? Dale Hurd has the latest.
33 million people in 7 states are sweltering under some of the hottest temperatures ever recorded. Scientists are calling it an event that happens only once in 1,000 years. Intense, prolonged, unprecedented, dangerous. That's how the National Weather Service is describing the historic heat wave hitting the Pacific Northwest, pushing daytime temperatures into the triple digits. On Sunday, Portland hit 112 degrees, with Seattle topping out at 104 degrees. Today, they're expected to go even higher.
To have such hot temperatures in June is historical. We haven't had anything like that.
Experts say the northwestern United States is under what they call a once-in-a-millennium heat dome that has ground many normal activities to a halt.
I can't move around outdoors.
In the Pacific Northwest, where air conditioners are only needed a handful of days a year, residents were lining up to buy them, but this store sold out.
I apologize. We were supposed to get more in.
On top of that, the power demand has caused outages for some 3,000 customers in Portland and 3,400 in Seattle. It's feared the early heat wave could mean an early kickoff to the West wildfire season, as officials already begin to restrict 4th of July fireworks.
It's just a matter of, what's going to set it off. And now you got the 4th of July coming. We're hearing fireworks go off every night.
We're now right back into it and having to be prepared for an eventual brush fire that's going to happen that's going to call us all out to the field again.
California is already suffering under drought. These satellite images taken about 1 year apart of the Angeles National Forest in Southern California illustrate the drought that is gripping the state. Major reservoirs are down in the west, threatening agriculture and drinking water supplies. Folsom Lake, serving 40 million Californians, is down 78 feet. Lake Mead, which serves 25 million people, including Las Vegas, is down 156 feet. And for those Americans in the Midwest and East, forecasters warn the heat is headed your way this week, with cities from Richmond to New York hitting the mid-90s. And in some places, it could feel like the triple digits. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
I mentioned a few days ago about Lake Mead going down. It serves Las Vegas, and if Vegas can't get any water, that whole city is out of business. I mean, literally out of business, because they've got to have water. And if they can't get water from Lake Mead, there's no place else to get it. So, I mean, that's just one of the casualties that's going to come out of this whole situation, and it's very serious. Well, in other news, he's backtracking and reversing course. The president is trying a new tactic to push through his ridiculously expensive $6 billion human infrastructure bill. So will this tactic work? George Thomas says more.
Pat, hello everyone. $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal is back on track after President Biden reversed course on linking it to another much more expensive bill. Last week, the president suggested he would only sign the bipartisan bill if Congress agrees to pass a $6 trillion measure Democrats have dubbed human infrastructure. Sunday, the president abandoned that stance, indicating he'll support the first bill focused on improving roads, bridges, and broadband on its own merits. While his agreement angered some Democrats, Republicans applauded the move.
It was a surprise, to say the least, that those two got linked. And I'm glad they've now been delinked, and it's very clear that we can move forward with a bipartisan bill that's broadly popular, not just among members of Congress, but the American people.
We really need to understand that this is our one big shot, not just in terms of family, child care, Medicare, but on climate change.
The White House aims to pass that larger bill with only Democrat support through a maneuver known as reconciliation. Well, Pat, it's interesting. You think they'll go to this whole idea of reconciliation?
I want to say that the Republicans are going to get rolled if they don't make a deal. I imagine right now that Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema will stand against anything of a budget reconciliation. But the idea is by budget reconciliation, they can get through with a slim majority, but they can pass the bill and link it up to something else. Everybody who's thinking wants to do infrastructure. The roads are crumbling, the bridges are breaking. We need that money. That's fine. It'll put people to work. It's a good thing. But all this other stuff is nothing but a New Deal socialist boondoggle that will bankrupt the country. But if they play that reconciliation game, they say, we get this one passed, and then we tie it into the other one. And the Republicans need to get an ironclad agreement, if need be, in writing that says, no, we will not link the two. If you pass this, we promise you we will not pass the other. And that's very, very important. George?
Pat, more and more states are dropping the $300 federal boost to unemployment benefits. Not surprisingly, the unemployment rate is dropping in those states. However, many businesses still lack the workers they need. CBN reporter Charlene Aaron shows us how they're struggling to fill the gaps.
Davis Professional Services here in Chesapeake, Virginia specializes in cleaning commercial properties and definitely feels the impact. The lack of workers has forced the company's owner to leave the office and step in to help take up the slack.
The labor force is just stagnant. It's not moving. It's not doing anything.
For more than 25 years, Jerry Flug has run his janitorial company. Then the pandemic hit, costing him about 25% of the business. With the company rebounding, he needs more workers.
It's been a big struggle for us to fill those positions. And we right now currently have about 35 positions that are open.
Across the country, as businesses emerge from the pandemic shutdown, they're facing a labor shortage, especially in the service industry. According to the Economic Policy Institute, child care issues and ongoing fears about the pandemic are somewhat to blame. Many also point the finger at enhanced unemployment benefits. Employers say the federal $300 weekly benefits are giving people a reason to decline work.
It's a big deal, and it's hard to compete with free money right now.
That's why more than 20 states are ending the federal unemployment benefit.
Just last week, this woman came to the door and was calculating her hours of saying, actually, I'm going to make more money off of unemployment than I would making here. It just happens, and we've just gotten used to it.
Human Resources Manager Carrie Terry says with so many job openings, workers feel they could weigh their options.
So I think that it has brought a certain level of audacity for people to kind of feel like they can wheel and deal. There's more of a bargaining level there that they're expecting because they know that they have so many options. And we have to do what we can to be attractive to these job seekers.
That includes rehiring former employees.
We reach back out to them, we call them, and ask, would you by any chance, are you interested in being a Davis team member again? And we actually have people who've said, you know what, I haven't considered that. I think that might be a good idea.
Flug has even rolled up his sleeves to help.
It's all hands on deck. We do have an approach of, I'm not going to ask anybody to do anything I'm not willing to do myself.
Meanwhile, Flug is hopeful that business will soon return to normal. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Pat, there's plenty of growth, but just not enough workers.
It's incredible. Any intelligent leader would immediately understand the reason for this problem and would fix it. It's a stroke of the pen. You say, no more benefits, period, boom, and it's over. Instead of that, they want to temporize and make excuses. Well, people aren't going back to work because of COVID, because of child care and all that. The reason they're not going back to work is people are not fools. If they can stay home and get a nice check with no Social Security and no taxes and no hassle, of course they'll do it. And if the government continues to write checks that way, it's going to cripple the economy. The small businesses need a hand. and they say, we want to go to work, we want to open our business, we want to serve our customers. How about letting us get some workers? And the government's saying, oh no, we're the big man, we're trying to be compassionate. There's no compassion in it. You're killing the economy. That's one more thing that is being done all over the country. The lockdown has been bad enough. It's been insane. The lockdown was a big mistake, but they locked everything down, and businesses are trying to come back, and they will come back, but let's get them some workers. So, I don't run the country, but you just wish those that did would pay attention. George?
Pat, we head to Florida, where rescue workers are digging feverishly in Miami for a fifth day, and they are optimistic they can still find survivors in the rubble of a partially collapsed condominium. More than 150 people are missing. At least 9 are confirmed dead right now. New information released this weekend shows a consultant found alarming evidence 3 years ago of major structural damage, including cracking columns, beams, and walls in the parking garage under the 13-story building. Search and rescue teams from Israel and Mexico are helping at that site. Pat, really devastating. Hard to imagine this is happening in a major metropolis like Miami.
You know, I wondered myself, what was the matter? Well, a soil expert found that the base underneath those buildings was settling at a matter of a few meters, or not meters, but millimeters, centimeters every year. And little by little by little, the foundation underneath the building let go. And then once that happened, the entire thing fell down. I was wondering, why did it happen? Well, the soil was just settling, and they didn't put enough. I guess they used these floating structures instead of driving piles into the ground like we used to do. They build these things on floating platforms of concrete, and then they build on from there. And hopefully those floating platforms can handle. Well, in this case, they didn't. It just takes a little bit, little by little by little, and the whole thing came down. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. George?
Pat, we head overseas, where Iran-backed militias are vowing revenge for U.S. strikes on their facilities near the border between Iraq and Syria. U.S. forces carried out the defensive precision airstrikes on operational and weapons storage sites. The Pentagon said the militias were using the facilities to launch unmanned aerial vehicle attacks against U.S. troops in the region. As the United States pulls out of Afghanistan, one big question is how to protect the thousands of Afghans who helped American forces. Those who served as interpreters, drivers, security guards, and in other essential roles, well, they now face extreme retaliation. CBN National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke has the latest on efforts to fulfill our promise not to abandon them.
The Biden administration is finally speaking out about plans to relocate Afghans who assisted U.S. forces.
We've already begun the process. Those who helped us are not going to be left behind.
Nearly 18,000 Afghans who served with U.S. forces are in bureaucratic limbo, waiting for their special immigrant visas to process. Biden says those people will be evacuated to other countries while the U.S. expedites their applications.
The good news is that the United States has done this before. For the Vietnamese in 1975, for the Kurds in 1996. Our Afghan partners fought and died for us, and their safety and the safety of their families must be our priority.
It's unclear which countries they'll be relocated to, but lawmakers and other advocates have suggested the U.S. territory of Guam.
It's a tried and true place to handle evacuees. They're actually in a very good place right now because they have a lot of open hotel rooms because tourism is down so much due to the pandemic.
The Taliban is already gaining ground in Afghanistan. Former interpreter Janice Shinwari says if they come across someone like him, it's a death sentence.
What the Taliban do with the interpreters, they will kill them and torture them in front of their families and children and post their video on the social media for the other countries and for other people to stop working American.
CBN News spoke with another interpreter who didn't want his identity disclosed. He's here in the U.S., but he has family in Afghanistan, and they face daily threats from the Taliban.
They can't even go out. They just stay home. Their children going to buy the stuff, bring home, And now there's no job actually. And a lot of bases are closed. My brother, he's been jobless since 1.5 years. There's no job. He can't even openly walk because the people know him.
A new assessment from U.S. intelligence agencies suggests the Afghan government could completely collapse as soon as 6 months after the U.S. withdrawal is completed. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Pat, this as the Taliban continue to inch their way across this country.
George, it's terrible. We spent close to $750 billion or so in Afghanistan, and the Taliban is anti-women. They say it's a crime to educate a woman. They put them in virtual slavery, and now the ruthlessness is against anybody who participated with the United States government. It's horrible that we've spent all this money. And these Taliban forces, there's some discussion about we're going to have a conference with the Taliban. It's like trying to have a conference with an alligator. I mean, they're going to eat you as fast as they can, and they just can't wait for us to leave. And then the women are going to be enslaved. The young girls will be enslaved. There'll be no education. There'll be that brutal enforcement of ultra-fundamentalist Islam. And the country will be back to the way it was with a matter of a few months. We've got to do something to help those translators, but it's a shame that we've spent all that money in that country. And I know it's been tough since the days of Alexander the Great. Afghanistan has been a horrible place. But to see the Taliban come in and take over after we spent all this money, this treasure, and these lives is just a tragedy. But we do owe it to these translators to get them someplace, to get them to safety and to protect them until we cannot pull out and leave those people alone. We can't do it. We must send a message to the world. If you cooperate with America, we will help you. That has not been the message that has gone since Vietnam. It hasn't gone, certainly, as was said with the Kurds, we've double-crossed the Kurds in a shocking way. And now we're going to do it again in Afghanistan. We hope that the Biden administration is going to stand tough with the way they're doing.